millions of hearts beat as one when Vietnam celebrates National Day. Hanoi, the 1,000-year-old capital, turned into a sea of crowds, flags, and faith during the National Day parade on September 2nd morning. Hanoi, the 1,000-year-old capital, turned into a sea of crowds, flags, and faith during the National Day parade on September 2nd morning. Across the country, millions tuned in, vibing with the marching columns in a sacred moment to recall sacrifices etched into the history, savor the hard-won peace of the present, and renew a quiet confidence in what lies ahead. The night before, Hanoi was already buzzing. Streets to the historic Ba Dinh Square and the parade routes were packed with local residents, tourists, and people who came from the northern mountainous, central, and southern regions, drawn to catch this historic spectacle in person. Among them were war veterans, their weathered faces lit with resolve, who had secured priority seating but chose instead to keep vigil through the night along the streets encircling Ba Dinh Square. Exhaustion was no match for them. The day was not merely a celebration but a living testament to independence, a reminder of the privilege of peace. As the official ceremony began and the national anthem echoed, spectators of every generation, from the elderly, veterans decorated with medals, to children soaking it all for the first time, stood tall, eyes locked on the national flag. Without cue, the crowd began to sing, hands pressed to hearts, their voices rising in a chorus so raw and resonant that it brought tears to many eyes. Each step of the soldiers' march and martial rhythms echoing through Hanoi streets struck a deep chord among spectators, igniting a profound sense of national pride. The disciplined formations of military units crossing Ba Dinh Square was more than a display of Vietnam's military strength, but also embodied an unyielding spirit, a message delivered with quiet confidence to foreign leaders and officials among the spectators, as well as international friends. 80 years have passed, but the heroic song of the Autumn of Independence still echoes, urging each generation of Vietnamese to continue. The sea of people today joining in the march is a powerful proof that the strength of the nation does not lie far away, but lies in millions of hearts sharing the same aspiration. Vietnam, Cuba premiere documentary to mark 80th National Day. The one-hour documentary titled Seeds of Happiness will be broadcast simultaneously in both countries at 2010 on September 2nd, Vietnam time, on VDV1, and at 9:10 on the same day, Cuba time, on Canal Caribe. To commemorate the 80th anniversary of Vietnam's National Day, September 2nd, 1945 to 2025, Vietnam Television's VTV1 and Cuba's Canal Caribe news channel will premiere a documentary featuring the lives of Vietnamese and Cuban farmers working together in rice cultivation in Los Palacios district, Cuba's Pinar del Rio province. The one-hour documentary titled Seeds of Happiness will be broadcast simultaneously in both countries at 2010 on September 2nd, Vietnam time, on VDV1, and at 9:10 on the same day, Cuba time, on Canal Caribe. Seeds of Happiness highlights the work of a group of Vietnamese agricultural engineers in Cuba who contributed their expertise to cultivating new rice varieties, including the hybrid CT16, helping to boost Cuba's rice production. According to Cuban's newswire Cuba Debate, with support from the Cuba's Institute of Information and Social Communication, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Vietnamese Embassy in Havana, the film is a testament to the friendship between the Cuban and Vietnamese people who have stood side by side through challenging times. Through the story of rice grains, the documentary shows that Vietnam is not only a leading global rice exporter, but also a nation willing to share knowledge and experience, guided by solidarity, to support Cuba's food sovereignty and the construction of a prosperous and sustainable country. Tu Luong, director of the Vietnam Television Center in Ho Chi Minh City and one of the film's producers, said the special broadcast is particularly meaningful as the values of independence, freedom, and happiness achieved by Vietnam 80 years ago continue to resonate around the world. With its direct and heartfelt cinematic storytelling, accompanied by carefully curated footage, photographs, music, and historical documents, the documentary is hoped to offer an emotional and humanistic experience in celebration of the National Day of Vietnam. Overseas Vietnamese mark 80th National Day with global celebrations. Overseas Vietnamese, OVs, around the world celebrated the 80th anniversary of National Day with a series of vibrant activities, showing their close-knit ties to the homeland. Overseas Vietnamese, OVs, around the world celebrated the 80th anniversary of National Day with a series of vibrant activities, showing their close-knit ties to the homeland. On September 2nd morning, the Vietnamese embassy in Tokyo hosted a gathering where OVs living, studying, and working in Japan gathered to watch a live broadcast of Hanoi's National Day celebrations on a large screen. Earlier on September 1st, the Vietnamese embassy in France and the Museum of Living History in Montreal held a ceremony to lay flowers at the statue of President Ho Chi Minh in Montreux Park on the outskirts of Paris. At the event, Ambassador Dinh Ton Tang unveiled a special edition postage stamp, a joint issuance by the Vietnamese embassy and La Poste, France's postal service, to mark the anniversary. He presented the stamp to Sabine Pizier, secretary of the Museum of Living History Association. Earlier, he and other delegates paid tribute to President Ho Chi Minh at his altar inside the embassy in Paris. Also on September 1st evening, the Vietnamese embassy in Canberra, Australia, hosted a ceremony marking the occasion. In his congratulatory remarks, Australian Minister for Trade and Tourism Don Farrell spotlighted Australia's ambition to boost trade with ASEAN, particularly Vietnam. He noted ample opportunities for cooperation in cybersecurity, e-commerce, and the Internet. Farrell said his role is to encourage Australian firms, especially those led by Vietnamese Australians, to expand abroad, particularly to Vietnam, fostering robust business relationships with good partners and friends. At a ceremony held on August 31st in Bangladesh's Dhaka, the Vietnamese embassy screened the Foreign Ministry's documentary chronicling 80 years of National Day history. Guests savored pho, Vietnam's iconic noodle dish prepared by embassy staff, and immersed themselves in the country's culture and tourism through traditional art performances and multimedia presentations. /